Council will call the meeting to order. For the record, it is February 15th, 2022 at 4:33 p.m. We'll begin this afternoon's work session with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilwoman Strader.
Here.
Councilman Burnt. Here. Councilman Cavanagh.
Here.
Councilman Hoagland.
Here.
Mayor Simison.
Here. Next item is the adoption of the agenda. Just say it now.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
one change for tonight's agenda. I know that item 13 under the consent agenda, we wanted to remove that from the consent agenda and just have a quick update on some changes just to make sure everybody's on the same page on that. So with that one change, I move adoption of the agenda as amended.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda with that change. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the agenda is adopted as amended. So next up is the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, we removed item 13 to hear that next on its own. So I move adoption, I move approval of the consent agenda as amended for the mayor to sign and clerk to attest.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda with item 13 removed. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the consent agenda is agreed to. Next item is item 13, which is removed from the consent agenda, which is resolution number 21-2300. Ask Mr. Neri to explain the changes to this item.
Dean hasn't yelled at you
There we go. Okay. So, Mr. Members of the council, Crystal is here as well, and she can talk about kind of the HR piece of this. What is in your packet is the, what is in your packet is the final version that would then go from this approval to our intranet for the employees to be able to see. So Councilman Morton had asked, the red lines are no longer there because again, this is the final version that the employees would be seeing. But you'll note, again, all the red lines were done, and Crystal could talk about that. But I just pulled up one of the ones we discussed about the policy and having the language in there that council approval is required. If you want to go to your packets, 7.5 is the procedures in regarding standards of conduct. So that section, if you were to scroll down to that, you'll see as the header on that section of the procedures that changes to these procedures require council approval. So all of those ones, and it was either 12 or 13, I don't remember the number, that 12 that all have that added to it based on our prior conversation. We also changed or added that language that we had discussed in regards to the preamble that sort of calls out the same thing. And then again, Crystal as office was in charge of taking all those red lines.
Check.
So Crystal's office, Crystal can explain kind of the red line process and how they handled that part from our last meeting.
Council, what's your pleasure?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
I think we're all on the same page. Those questions that Councilman Borton had were fixed in that. And Crystal, do you want to defer to the mayor to give you permission for the podium? But go ahead, Mr. Sheehan.
I'm just here in case there's any additional questions. Like Bill stated, we walked away from our last meeting time together, incorporating the options you requested, which was to have the updated preamble, which has the language in there stating that any procedure that has a financial impact to that cannot be changed without coming forward for council approval. So that has been in there in the preamble. And then secondly to that, on the 12 policies that Councilmember Borton brought forward, we have the statement Bill just read to you at the top of each of the procedures for that, but those procedures also may not be changed without prior council approval. So what was submitted to you was the final version, no red line. The red lines were provided back to you on November 9th for you to review and take a look at and ask us any questions that you have. So we're here to request your approval of the updated manual in the format you requested and move that forward for approval tonight.
Thank you. Council, any questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
I move that we approve resolution number 21-2300.
I have a motion and a second to approve resolution number 21-2300. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. You guys have it, and the resolution is agreed to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll move on to department commission reports. Item 15 is the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council Quarterly Program Update. Ask the hand to come forward and do some introductions.
Mr. Mayor, City Council members, as always, I'm delighted to be here to introduce two of the amazing student leaders that make the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council the incredible group that it is this year in particular. After taking a brief pause for the winter break and holidays, MIAC has resumed its regular schedule of meetings in January. So over the past month and a half, we've had 2 general council meetings and some exciting developments and plans for the immediate future. I don't want to steal the thunder of the 2 presenters, so I will welcome Jimena and Audrey to come up and introduce themselves and tell you a little bit more about it.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, City Council members, personal introduction is in order. My name is Audrey Thompson. I am a senior of Renaissance, graduate 2022. I am in the Associates program, and today I am presenting with Jimena.
Mr. Mayor, City Council members, my name is Jimena Guzman. I am a senior at Renaissance High School, and I am the vice chair for MIAC.
Perfect, let's begin. You know any good jokes?
I can't say that I prepared any today. Have you?
Okay, perfect. So just to reiterate, this is covering everything that we have done January through February, including just yesterday's meeting. All right, regular business. So January 31st, we had our guest speaker, Bill Parsons. Bill Parsons is part of the Planning and Zoning Committee, and he helped brief us and the General Counsel on the general actions that happen in planning and zoning and how that functions and the importance of it in our community. We plan to have him as a speaker because specifically we want to incorporate some of his message into future meetings, which I will cover. February 7th, we had an executive meeting where we covered and met with PEER. PEER is a wellness center that offers free peer-based recovery support services specifically for mental health, which is an item that ourselves and MSAB, Mayor Senior Advisory Board, wanted to cover in future meetings and dates. What we hope to do is plan a 5K that will be all-inclusive to the community, specifically uniting MIAC with our community, where we will call it the Road to Recovery, and it will focus on mental health and the road to recovery and wellness. Next, just yesterday, celebrated a very romantic Valentine's by having a MIAC meeting. We had everything from snacks, cookies, to talking about how we can be more civically engaged in our community. Specifically, we wrote Valentine's Day card for our seniors, local seniors and senior centers. And we also were briefing on future things that we can move on into the future.
All right, community service update. So recently, we collaborated for the Connection for the Cure Suicide Awareness Concert. Council members Sophie Robbins, Jacob Madsen, Grace, and an external member, Sophie's sister, all handed out stickers and greeted thousands of guests as they entered this concert. Yeah.
Recruitment efforts. So in an effort to diversify our group and get a little bit less of Renaissance High School and a little bit more of every other school, we are trying our best to recruit other students from all ages from in high school to come and join us. We've been doing this by having and hosting incentives such as if you bring a friend and an incentive, then you will get your name into a raffle for a Dutch Bros card. Seems to be popular amongst the kids. We've already had a lot of people come and collaborate in that. We are also still collaborating with principals of other schools, all in Meridian, some in Boise as well, for their students to have on their announcements to come to MIAC and advertising that as well. So we are very active in that. Also, I personally spoke with Kiwanis and Councilmember Luke Kavanagh, and we also advertised the importance of student engagement, civic engagement, and talked about a little bit more about how to inspire and get your kids passionate. And that included one of the items was being involved in MIAC and being involved in local government.
All right, and now for future events that MIAC is planning for. As for social events, we find that the social aspect of MIAC is something that has been missing in recent years. So we are putting forth an effort to try to increase that social engagement aspect. We will be having a murder mystery party during one of our meetings. It will be centered around problem solving, that sort of bonding event, and it will have an 80s theme. And then after our meeting on February 28th, the General Council will be engaging in a financial simulation called Mad City Money. Next, as for leadership development, we are hosting an event planning themed MIAC meeting that on March 14th, our chair, Sophie Robbins, will be putting together an event planning guest speaker, as well as a nonprofit panel, again, led by our chair, Sophie Robbins, and is putting together a panel of nonprofit executives planned for the date of March 28th.
Just want to reiterate that panel that Sophie Robbins, our chair, it is going to be centered on leadership.
Yes. All right, as for government affairs, we are planning a planning and zoning activity. Government Affairs Chair Audrey Thompson is putting together a planning and zoning activity for our general council members on February 28th. It will be an interactive simulation of the dynamics between citizens, planning and zoning, and the ordinances in place for that. In addition to that, we will be having a youth lobby day. The MIAC members will be able to send in and record videos for the American Heart Association's this year asynchronous and virtual youth lobby day. These videos will specifically discuss the impact of vaping.
Perfect. And just a little sneak peek into the planning and zoning activity. I have been working on this for the past couple of months in hopes to create and bring general council closer to an activity and engage in local government that is applicable to their lives. I noted that when general council and when we debriefed in our government meetings, they were talking about the glamours of being a politician and talking about how fun it could be and how dramatic it could be. And of course, those are all relevant, but I wanted to talk more about what affects everyday life and what do our city council members actually do for us. And one thing that Mr. Mayor Robert Simonson mentioned was planning and zoning, talking about that because obviously it's very relevant in our community with the growth that we are experiencing. So I created simulation, interactive game that is strategic, creative, and has a competitive factor in it. I introduced it to our general council, and they came up with the name for the city that will be featured, which is Meridian. It's like Meridian, but with more idiom, is how they put it. Going forward, if you will note that I made a fake district map for Meridian, and it is themed very closely to Meridian's actual district borders in hopes that it will create a very lifelike, but at the same time entertaining game and activity for them as we go through. In the game, there will be campaigning, propositions, city code and ordinance, districts, randomized factors. It will be very fun. There will be a place for everyone, whether you want to talk, whether you want to be a city council member, part of the planning and zoning, or being a citizen. There's a place for everyone in this game, and this game will be featured on the 28th if anybody is interested.
Audrey, would you say that this map has more idiom in it than the Meridian one?
Definitely more idiom. Yeah.
Fantastic. All right, as for community service events coming up, we are planning on doing something for Do the Right Day, which is coming up on April 7th. We are planning to develop an outreach plan with local businesses to see how we can contribute with this. In the past, MIAC has interacted a lot with Do the Right Day, so we are hoping to sort of revive that interactive aspect. This next one is my personal favorite. We will be hosting a senior prom for the Meridian Senior Center. This is specifically with leadership development in mind, as the Executive Council has put it on General Council members to be forming a committee, leading and planning the development of this prom, which will be taking place someplace in April or May.
Perfect. To conclude, what MIAC has done as a collective in January to February has focused very much on team building, collective work, and including raising awareness for mental health, which will also be featured in future months. As we go forward, we want to reiterate that we are also focusing on leadership skills as well. I would like to open it up to the mayor and city council members. Is there any other questions?
Thank you, Audrey and Jimena. Council, any questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader.
just a comment, Audrey and Yimena. Wow, I'm just blown away by how this is a hive of activity, all these different things you're focusing on. It's really great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
put in a plug. If you can book a member of MIAC to speak at any public event, do it. Audrey has mentioned, she spoke to our Kiwanis Club. Thanks to Pam Orr for scheduling that at the start of January. It's one of the best speakers we had all year, and not just talking about MIAC, but it was really beneficial, I think, for that club to hear about what goes on in a high school student's life, particularly highly motivated students like MIAC members. So as you're out and about and you're hearing people saying, hey, we'd like someone to come speak to our group, book MIAC as we should have like a MIAC speaker series. Audrey did a really great job. I'll also put in a plug. I'll be volunteering at Mad City Money. If you've never volunteered at this event, it's a great activity and it's a great way to interact with MIAC. So if you're free on a Monday night, stop by. It's well worth your time. I'm looking forward to it. 2 weeks.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burt.
you guys are best of the best.
Thank you.
Really good at what you guys do, and you know, it's just really interesting how even when you guys are involved with commissions and the just what you project and your insight, it's, you know, most of the time you guys do it better than the adults. So we appreciate everything you do.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
I have a question. You know, we face the same thing as when we do comprehensive plan map changes or anything like that. You know, you want council, citizen input, and the council wants to hear from people, and it can be hard to get people engaged. And, you know, you're trying to do the same thing. So what do you think are some of the obstacles you have for kids participating in MIAC? Is it just the amount of things that they have to do, other activities, just lack of interest, or, and how are you overcoming that? You think that where you can be successful?
Mr. Mayor, City Council members, I think that one of the top issues that is facing MIAC members in terms of engagement and engaging in a lot of these social activities has to be that it can be very intimidating to be within the City Council chambers, especially, well, even if it is every other Monday, and especially when MIAC has been down for so long, trying to reinvigorate that social aspect and reinvigorate that focus on community service. We have faced this obstacle of trying to get us to come together as a group and really focus the General Council's energy on a lot of these community service activities that we are pushing. I think that one of the things that we are trying to do to overcome that is to try to make MIAC more of a community through these social bonding activities and through community service efforts that are not only collaborative with different organizations or nonprofits in the area, but that also focus on having the General Council take a role. And so the engagement was the main inspiration for having the General Council lead that committee for the senior prom to try to get those leadership development skills that we've been working on into work.
Just like to also add to that little thing, I play the violin as well. And one thing that my teacher tells me is that when you're going to be practicing, things are going to be fighting for that time. Your family's going to be fighting for that time. Your friends are going to be fighting for your time. That homework that you have, the test that you have to study for tomorrow is going to be fighting for that time. So a lot of times while we're in MIAC as the executive board, a lot of the things we feel like salesmen sometimes because we're incentivizing these types of programs. And at the end of the day, it is their decision to show up and it is their decision to be motivated and passionate about local government. But all we can do is tell them this is going to better your life, and it's not just going to be a scholarship opportunity or resume, something you can put on your resume. It's going to be something that's going to better you as a person and help you build those soft skills that's going to help you in the future.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Hoagland.
Just to follow up, that's fantastic. And also, I just want to encourage you to keep at it. And, you may set goals and look at things and, when you graduate and walk out and go, boy, we didn't meet that goal or something, but you don't realize the seeds that you plant that help for future success. And you can look back and go, oh, I think we were part of that. And we do the same thing on this council. There are things that we do now that, down the road, years from now, people won't remember our name that we did something that set up for success in the future. So you always want to plant seeds wherever you go. You may not harvest it, but it's always great to plant those positive seeds.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
I just want to share too, because I got notification about this week. So in a former life, I was fortunate enough to be a MIAC advisor, and some of the students that I worked with that met in MIAC have now gotten married and have now had a child. So it is possible in our future that you could have a MIAC participant that is a child of 2 MIAC graduates. And I just think that's really cool. It just kind of speaks to all the opportunities. You can even start a family, maybe later in life, as a result of attending the Mayor's Youth Advisory Program.
For the record, there is no fraternizing of that nature that is part of MIAC that I'm aware of.
Like I said, yesterday, our meeting yesterday, very romantic.
Exactly.
Charge for the seniors, yes.
Mr. Mayor, I'm just curious.
Sorry.
If Councilman Cavanagh knows the name of the baby, by chance is the middle name Mayak? So,
Mr. Mayor, City Council members, I would just like to put on the record that that was a missed opportunity and yeah.
Well, thank you both. I don't want to burst your bubble, but if the game turns out to be successful, unfortunately, as it was developed under the city's program, technically, I think it belongs to the city, but maybe we can talk about that in another life, but we look forward to seeing that. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate you. Thank you.
So Kyle, let's talk about sewers.
Mr. Mayor, I'd love to.
So with that, we'll move on to item 16 this evening, the Public Works City Code update from Mr. Raddick.
Mr. Mayor, council members, normally this is a job for Clint Dolsby, but I guess I'll be playing the part of Clint Dolsby tonight. The purpose of this proposed code update is to eliminate confusion about who's responsible for maintenance of a sewer service at what locations. The vast majority of sewer services in this city go from a home out the front, under the front yard, to the street, to the water, to the sewer main. And the current code is written to support that and says, until that sewer line gets to the right-of-way line or the property line, it's the responsibility of the property owner to maintain that. And then once it gets past the right-of-way line, it's the responsibility of the city to maintain that. There are, however, a lot of sewer services that don't go from a building across private property to right-of-way. Commercial sewer services, a lot of times will never get to right-of-way. They'll go through a parking lot and get to a sewer main that's in an easement. Another example that we're seeing a lot of now is private drives. And that sewer service will leave the property owner's property, go onto the private drive, which is not right-of-way, and then go to right-of-way. So this proposed code update clarifies that until the sewer service gets to either right-of-way or a public utility easement, public sewer easement, then it is the responsibility of the property owner to maintain it. And once it gets to that easement, the city is responsible to maintain it. And that is the entire update, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions you have. We're just asking for some guidance and tonight, and if everybody's okay with it, we'll move forward in a few weeks with putting it on regular council agenda for a hearing. Unless you have some other guidance for us to go back and work some other things out that you can think of.
So just what I heard, using the private drive as an example, the house would be responsible till it gets to that place, and then someone else would be responsible potentially if they're not the owner of the private drive. If it's an HOA, is that who would own a private drive that would be responsible for that section before it hit the street?
And Mr. Mayor, good question, because I know it's not the city. So depending on how that private drive was built and I guess dedicated is technically, I'm sure it's HOA property. It doesn't belong to those 3 homeowners that use it. But I would imagine, and I'm just guessing, maybe looking for some help from Bill here, that the property owner is going to be responsible for maintaining that service until it gets to city responsibility. So I don't.
Your mic's off, Bill.
There we go. Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So yeah, I would agree with Kyle. I mean, again, we're trying to create some clarity on where that service belongs. And again, between the owner of the service, the property that it crosses, and then a public right of way that we have acquired, that's what we're trying to clear up here in this particular instance. And so I don't have I guess a better answer than what Kyle said. I mean, it really is trying to make sure that the property owner understands, again, we're only responsible for this point. We have the same issue with water, although water's been a little different, but where, again, we cover to the meter, and then everything beyond the meter goes to the property owner. So I think this really is just a cleanup to me, but again, if you have other questions, we certainly can answer those.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
Basically, Kyle, what we're doing is ensuring that the city is not going to be responsible for anything on private ground. However, whether it's a single property owner, or it's going to be covered by homeowners association, or in the case of a private drive, maybe it is the 3 homeowners that are on a private drive, but it's clear that we won't be going in there because that's not our property. That's not our public easement. It's their issue.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Hoagland, that's correct. We just want to make it clear that unless it's a city easement with city infrastructure in it, it's not ours to maintain and fix.
So maybe going to the next step, stay with the private drive. When the HOA goes away, maybe the private drive gets redistributed back to those 3 property owners. My real question is if there's a third party in between where the city, someone else in between, what is their obligation to do something? Do we have the right to go force that middle person to do something for the benefit of the person at the end of the line? Because it's one thing to tell the homeowner, you got to fix it and we're not going to do it, but to tell somebody else that there's a problem in between, that they got to go fix it for the benefit of another person.
So, Mr. Member, as a council, I would see this playing out in a situation like that, where the middle property owner is going to say, look, I'm not paying for any of it. I don't need it. There's nothing that affects me with this. We don't have the right to access it. That's our biggest problem, is that we don't have an ability to just drive a truck into their driveway and dig up the driveway. So we're going to need some level of permission to do that. I would anticipate, and I don't know if Kyle's had experience with these, where, again, most of those other property owners, they get it, that as long as they're not paying for it, they don't care. So the other party is going to have to pay for that cost because they're the ones that need the service restored. But the middle one, I don't know if we've had a lot of issues with that, Kyle. That would be kind of on you guys.
Mr. Mayor, council members, it's an interesting question because it goes beyond water and sewer. It goes to pavement as well. And it's one of the things that certainly we're not responsible for pavement, but that's going to be an eventual question for, 40 years down the road, no pun intended, when the pavement is all cracked up. It's not ACHD's pavement. That pavement belongs to the HOA, and it's the 3 or 4 homes that use that private drive that need it. So who's going to pay for that? I don't know. I believe our position would be that the only person benefiting from that service that goes from the home across the private drive to the city main is that homeowner, and that homeowner would be responsible for that service.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Schrader.
Yeah, so, here, so much of our city is new, right? I had the pleasure of renovating a 100-year-old home in a suburb of New York where I had to replace the clay pipe that ran from our house to the street. I guess my question would be, I think it makes perfect sense to go from the homeowner to the public right away. I guess my question would be, in the case of a private drive, is there any city infrastructure underneath that drive that is not specific to one homeowner? Like, is there a trunk? Is there anything that multiple homeowners share that you could argue is like a piece of city infrastructure? Or does each home have an individual line that goes to the public right away?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Strader, Councilwoman Strader, I'm sorry. Sometimes we do have a water or sewer main in a private drive, only if it benefits the city. It is the exception to the rule. But if we do, we have an easement over that. And so the vast majority of private drives do not have any public infrastructure that serves everyone. That's why we have we generally stop the water main and we stop the sewer main at the entrance to the private drive, and then it's just services beyond that.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
maybe just to, I think, are you looking for feedback, Kyle?
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Strader, yeah, just any feedback, any guidance, and then yeah, we don't need a vote or anything like that. So
Clint's looking for feedback. You're just a straw man in the middle.
that's right. That's right. Nobody asked about water services. I was ready for those questions.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
concept makes sense to me. I guess I'm just worried about kind of a narrow set of circumstances that, have we thought through everything, like this carve out that I guess it would fall under a public easement, but I think we want to minimize conflicts between neighbors. So I'm supportive in general of the idea. If we could just look into some of these details on areas where there could be a conflict. The private drive sounds like one. Maybe looking at some examples where we've seen conflicts in the past of people coming into the city later too, where they've had their own services and we've had to go back and put them in, how that would play out under this new approach.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same place. I mean, I just, the one that scares me is anything that's in a HOA responsibility. I mean, we have HOAs on Cherry Lane, which were there at one point in time, and people were responsible for the weeds, and then the HOA went away. Now no one's responsible for the weeds. I mean, technically someone is responsible for the weeds, but nobody wants to enforce who's responsible for the weeds to do that stuff. And so when you start putting stuff into common shared, it's one thing to do a parking lot in a shopping center that's owned by, it's private land that's owned by somebody, even if it is a corporation. But when you start getting into communal ownership of property that could go away, and then what is the result of that going away? How does that impact something in the future when this is likely going to be the issue? 30 years, 40 years. Just make sure we've thought through that to the best of our ability if this addresses that. Otherwise, we're just kicking it to somebody else when these pop.
So, Mr. Mayor, members of council, I mean, we certainly can have this conversation with Public Works and with planning, because you're right. I mean, the narrow circumstances are pretty narrow, but they do exist. And so we want to make sure most platting will have utility easements listed on the plat. So the person does know there's a utility easement in that driveway for all utilities, because the cable and everything else might be running through that as well. But we can certainly make it clear. I mean, again, it may be a requirement that we decide from the city that if you have a private driveway, you have to dedicate the entire driveway as an easement. to the city for the utilities that are placed in it. That's
I guess if I could just respond to that. I'm sorry. I thought you were done, but your mic was off. I guess this is just kind of a continuation of the private drive conversation, because we don't want to go into a private drive. We don't want to have anything to do with a private drive because there's no guaranteed access in a private drive. There's cars there, trucks there, RVs there. We don't want our public works infrastructure in a private drive. That's kind of a major point about this.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Hoagland.
Then a question, I think for those rare instances, something might crop up. Do we have a mechanism, Bill, where we can place a lien on the property? Something needs to be done. There's a serious situation. We can go in, take care of the problem, but place a lien on the property because there's going to be an owner of that property. And then when that time, at some point in time, they will, the enterprise fund will be reimbursed for that cost.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we don't currently have that in place. That's certainly something we could look at as an option and trying to create that with these types of private drive issues.
I guess I would take your, this conversation and head back to Warren and Clint and Ted to go over some of these, cases. And certainly the private drives are great examples of where the property owner is responsible for a much longer water and sewer service than a house on a cul-de-sac or a street. So we'll definitely discuss it internally. I guess we'll come back again for more discussion.
That'd be great, especially when we have another attorney up here. Okay, thanks, Kyle. Okay, so next item is item 17, Legal Department Draft Ordinance Concerning City Council Districting. Mr. Neri.
There we go. So I'm going to do this short because Kurt's here as well and he can explain it. What we've done, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, is that the ordinance that's in front of you has a few changes from our prior discussions as well as conversation with the mayor and Councilmember Hoagland about the direction this ordinance wants to go. I'm going to let Kurt, since this is probably going to cut me off in about 10 seconds or less, come up and explain the specific changes and kind of where we are with it now. We're ready to move it forward when you're ready to bring it forward.
Kurt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. So this is an item you've seen before, actually on a couple of different occasions. So the last time you saw this was in December of 2021. And we just made a broad presentation, asked for feedback, and we received some feedback from the council as a whole. So what you have before you tonight reflects the changes that we heard from various council members and from the body as a whole. They basically fall into three categories and they're fairly minor, but I want to just point them out to you. So the changes that are in the draft ordinances before you this evening as compared to the December 2021 version are as follows. First, we've modified the language that talks about the appointments of members to the committee to make that clear that just like our other committees and commissions, that the appointments are made by the mayor, subject to approval by the city council. So we've added language to make that more clear. Secondly, we have added some additional language and requirement that the ex officio members of this committee, essentially staff members, as well as a member from Ada County, would develop 3 draft maps in advance of the committee, in advance of the deliberations of the committee to sort of prime the pump. So the idea would be that from a staff perspective, we provide 3 potential districting maps so that when the committee does assemble and begins its deliberations, it has a place to start. But we also have added language that makes it clear that the committee is not bound by those 3 scenarios. They can choose one of those 3, or they can discard all 3 and do something completely different. The idea simply was to give the committee a starting point. And then lastly, in terms of changes to the ordinance from the last time you saw this, is that we've the initial version indicated that there would be a minimum of 1 public hearing after a draft districting map had been once the committee had gravitated toward a preferred draft. We have changed that to say a minimum of 2 public hearings. And the reality is the committee may have many more public hearings than that, but we wanted to have a floor. And so that now says there'd be a minimum of 2 public hearings. So those are the changes from last time. And then I'm going to transition to a second topic, which is we didn't have it ready for this evening, but I just wanted to let you know, the council know that between today and next time you see this, we'll likely make one additional change to the ordinance. And that is there's a section, just like in our current code, there's a section that pertains to vacancies on the city council. And it occurred to us sort of late in the game, quite frankly, so shame on us, is that the way it's written currently is it contemplates the districts are in place and ready to go. But there is a possibility, because the ordinance will be adopted and the districts will follow some months later. There's a remote possibility is how I characterize it, that a vacancy could occur sooner before the districts actually exist. And so we'll likely modify that language just slightly to indicate, here's what happens if a vacancy occurs before the districts exist, and here's how it works after that point in time. So we'll just make that clear so we can pick up both eventualities or the possibilities of those things. So that's something that's not in the version that's before you today. It will, some modification will be likely in the ordinance when you see it at your next discussion. Then the last thing, just to report to the council, I wanted to make the council aware that Ada County has solidified the new precincts based upon the 2020 census. And of course, the litigation regarding statewide redistricting has now been fully resolved as well. And so the pieces are in place for, once this ordinance is adopted, the pieces are in place to begin the districting process for Meridian. Because we now have the precincts, which kind of make the building block, so to speak, for the districting process. So that's what we have before you tonight. Again, as before, no action for the council this evening. Really an opportunity to touch base with the city council, receive additional input if you have some additional thoughts for us. And then our goal would be to have an ordinance before you for consideration for actual action soon, so that we can get going. And the mayor and others have talked about a timeline where we like to have this ordinance in place soon, seat the members of the committee, and have these districts in place this year so that everybody has ample time to plan for the 2023 city general election. With that, I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Kurt. Council questions.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
You touched on something that, as I was kind of reviewing things over the weekend, kind of crept into my mind. And I don't know if we do this on other resolutions, but I think timing is really critical, particularly as we're communicating this to the public. So I don't know if it's worth considering that we'll have a map presented to the public by this particular month. And, to try and have this process completed by this particular month. I'm just more offering that as flavor for consideration. I think kind of road mapping this out and trying to have some deadlines in place lets the committee know that we're serious about moving forward on this, because I think that's what the public's looking for. So that just would be the only addition that I would include, is to maybe have some dates certain why certain benchmarks would be met.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Cavanagh. I think that's an excellent suggestion. We're in a better position today than we have been previously, because of course we've had a number of unknowns up until just the last few weeks, quite frankly, in terms of when is the census information going to be available, when will the litigation relative to the statewide redistricting be complete, and then when would the county have its precincts in place. And so now we have better answers to all those things. So I think we are in a better place to map out a timeline. And if that's the council's judgment or preference, we certainly could do so. My one thought I would offer is that, remember, this is an ordinance that's intended to develop initial districting, which would happen this year in 2022 in advance of the 2023 general city election. But also, this is the ordinance that's going to be as part of the Meridian City Code on a going forward basis as well. So I may offer just a thought that to put a specific timeline in that's specific to 2022, and we know the ordinance is going to be in place on a going forward basis, it would become dated very quickly, and we could amend the ordinance later to remove it. But perhaps a different idea is that maybe outside the ordinance process, the council could establish a timeline for the committee.
Kurt, that's what I was going to suggest. Since state code already dictates the time frame for us by which to have it done, so that's already determined. I've been on record with you all to say their goal is to have this done a year in advance of the opening of that. So we do have a technical time frame of August. We could look at that, but if council wants to do a resolution to memorialize that expectation, that's going to be my conversation with anybody that I'm looking to bring on this, is that we are going to try to get this done and have something, finalized by August. So that's my expectation. You feel necessary to put it in code or resolution. I don't think code, to Chris, I don't think code on this one is where it makes sense, but there could be other things if we want to formalize it. Like when we appoint them, in the resolution that we appoint them, a date expectation.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Schrader.
I just wanted to say thanks a lot, Kurt, and also to Bill Nary's whole team for the hard work on this. And I appreciate that it seems like it's set up to have a really good citizen-led input process, that there's going to be plenty of public hearings, that it'll be impartial and informed by experts, and really to get the existing city council out of the weeds where we don't want to be. So I appreciate that. I think this is a really good resolution to me. I think it's in a good, or ordinance, I think it's in a good spot.
Council, any other questions? Okay, then we will work to bring this back here in the next few weeks, looking at how things are set up. So thanks, Kurt.
Thank you.
So with that, council, we've reached item 17 on the agenda. Or I'm sorry, we're complete with item 17. The next item up is executive session. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
I move we go into executive session per Idaho Code 74-206D.
I have a motion and a second to go into executive session. Is there any discussion? If not, clerk, call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Strader,
Aye.
Burnt, Cavanagh,
Aye.
Hoagland.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carries, and we will move into executive session. Council, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we come out of executive session.
I have a motion to come out of executive session. Do I have a second?
Second?
Motion and a second to come out of executive session. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. And we are out of executive session. Councilman Hoagland,
Mr. Mayor, I move we adjourn.
a motion to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned. Council will call the meeting to order. For the record, it is February 15th, 2022 at 6:02 PM. We will begin tonight's regular city council meeting with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilwoman Strader.
Here.
Councilman Byrne.
Here.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Here.
Councilman Hoagland. Mayor Simonson.
Here. Next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd all please rise and join us in the pledge. Our next item is the community invocation. Do we have David Risen here with us this evening? If you'd like to come forward, tonight's invocation will be given by David Rise with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. If you all please join us in the community invocation or take this moment of silence and reflection.
Our Father in heaven, we are grateful to be gathered tonight, grateful for a city council that recognizes thee in prayer. We ask thy blessings upon them, that their deliberations tonight may be thoughtful and acting in the best interest of the city and those parties involved. We're grateful for the council and ask thy blessings upon them and their associates and their families. We're grateful for staff and ask thy blessings upon them and their associates and families. We are grateful for our first responders and ask thy blessings upon them and their associates and families. And this we do in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Council, now we're up to the adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
I move adoption of the agenda as published.
Second the motion?
I have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda as published. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the agenda is adopted. Mr. Clerk, do we have anybody under public forum?
Mr. Mayor, we do. Mike Luis.
Michael, you'll be recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you. I came tonight for a couple reasons. One is the Meridian City Library, the content that's available there, I think is inappropriate and anybody can go grab it at any age. And you guys have a packet in front of you with some of the books. I talked to the library today and they did confirm that they have them. You do not need to be 18 to go grab these books. And you guys could flip through that and you could read some of them and you tell me if you want your kids to go see that. It's very inappropriate. The city of Meridian has codes, which I've also brought and highlighted. I talked to one of your planning people and they said the red tape is, you might as well not even think about opening an adult store here, that the city of Meridian Library has the books. So I think you guys need to look at that. This is a big issue in the community. The second is, it was my daughter brought to my attention that there is boys being able to use the women's bathroom if they identify as being a woman. That's not okay either. And that was passed by the council, I believe, back in 2019. Could stand corrected, I'm not sure, but I don't think that's appropriate either, that men are available or vice versa. Grown women are going in to little boys' bathrooms. I don't think that's acceptable. And then I'd also like to give kudos to the Meridian PD for getting the grant for the shoulder tap, which is the underage, making sure people aren't buying for them. So I give you guys kudos for that. But I would like it brought to the attention, the Meridian Library, and if you guys are going to do anything about that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Jerry, would it be possible for you to speak to with Mr. Reese just so he understands the relationship between the city and the library district regarding that, and as well as the ordinance applicable to that. So and if we need to have a follow-up conversation, we can set one up and have that with my office.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so with that, council, we'll move on to item number 1 this evening, which is Department Commission Report. The first item is with our police department fiscal year 2022 net zero budget amendment, in the amount of $7,310 for the Office of Drug Policy Grant. And turn this over to Kendall.
Mr. Mayor, my apologies, Kendall. I wanted to make you known, Mr. Councilman Borton's here.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman Borton. Noted for the record, 6:07 p.m. Kendall?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I'm here for the net zero budget amendment, as the mayor just stated. That is to conduct 2 alcohol compliance check and shoulder tap operations that we do. And then there were some incidentals there for participation in the statewide sticker shock campaign as well. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, council. Any questions? If not, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burnt.
I move that we approve the police department's fiscal year 2022 net zero budget amendment in the amount of $7,310 for Office of Drug Policy that has been presented to us by Kendall.
Second the motion?
I have a motion and a second to approve the budget amendment in the amount of $7,310. Is there any discussion? If not, clerk, call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Strader,
Aye.
Burnt, Cavanagh,
Aye.
Borton,
Aye.
Hoagland.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carries, and item is agreed to. Thank you, Kendall. Up next is our action items. Our first item is a public hearing for Lakeview Golf Course 2022 proposed fee schedule. We will open this public hearing with comments from Mr. Barton.
Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. We're here to talk about some new fees for the Lakeview Golf Course. On January 4th, Director Sidaway was here and had a conversation with council regarding some new fees for the golf course. At that time, he presented 2 different options. The first option was a across-the-board 6% increase to daily green fees and also a season pass offering. The second option was a 6% increase to green fees and then kind of a restructuring of the pass offerings to offer, different times. Some people don't need an unlimited pass. They golf Monday through Friday in the weekends, afternoon. So at that time, council said that the preference, the general preference was that we bring back option number 2, which was a 6% increase to the daily green fees, and then also the variety of different offerings. I would like to bring to the council's attention that we've noticed these fees and had a conversation with the golf course focus group and then also the men's and women's golf associations at the golf course, just to collect any additional feedback. Also, when we noticed the fees, it was brought to our attention that there's a typo in that, and that the new pass offerings, there is a restricted pass. And so all of the restricted pass offerings were noticed as limited Monday through Friday after 12 and weekends and holidays after 12. And what it should have said was unlimited Monday through Friday, anytime, and then weekends and holidays after 12. So any motion that you have should correct that typo. We checked with the legal department to see if we needed to renotice them, and it was Bill and his team's opinion that the noticing that we did was fine and that council can approve them. As long as, I think as long as the motion includes that correction on the record. So I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Council, any questions for Mr. Barton?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Hoagland.
Mike, would you restate that again, that the restricted, so we look at couple restricted, military, senior restricted, senior couple restricted, And those are the ones that have the notation on there for that's incorrect.
Correct.
So it should read instead, if you could go through that Monday through Friday. So if you can repeat those again.
Yeah, so any restricted product, the couple restricted, senior military restricted, and the senior couple restricted. If you buy one of those passes, you can golf anytime, Monday through Friday. You are restricted to weekends after 12, so Saturday, Sunday, and holidays after 12. Yeah. Yep, during the week, anytime.
Thank you. Council, any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Mike. This is a public hearing. Mr. Clark, do we have anybody sign up to provide testimony on this item?
Mr. Mayor, we did not.
Okay. Is there anybody in the audience that'd like to come forward and provide testimony on this item, or anybody online that'd like to provide testimony? And if you're online, you can use the raise your hand feature. Seeing nobody in the audience and nobody online, do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
I move we close the public hearing for Lakeview Golf Course 2022 proposed fee schedule.
I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the public hearing is closed. Mr. Neri, are you looking for a motion this evening to direct a resolution to be brought back forward, come back, or?
Yes, sir. Yes. Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
I move approval of the adoption of the new fees of the Meridian Parks and Recreation Department with the fees to reflect for the restricted sections for couples, senior and military, and senior couple, that the restrictions apply to Monday through Friday. The golf is at any time, and for weekends and holidays, it is restricted to after 12 noon.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there discussion? Councilman Kavner.
Mike, Steve, team, appreciate your guys' work on this. Like when we talked about last time, I really struggle with creating these special classes right now as we're still kind of getting our grips with the course. So I'm not supportive of the motion, but I appreciate the work that you're doing to try and invite a new customer base in. Look forward to seeing what we learn from this.
Is there further discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay.
No.
One nay, the rest ayes, and the motion carries, and we'll see that back, Mr. Neri, next week. Okay. So with that, we'll move on to item 3 this evening, which is a public hearing for Friendship Subdivision H 2021-0083. We will open this public hearing with staff comments from Alan.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This is Alan Tiefenbach, Associate Planner with the City of Meridian. This is an application for an annexation and zoning to R8 and a preliminary plat for 40 lots. 41 were originally, well, actually 42 were originally proposed, then it went down to 41, so now we're at 40. I'll talk quickly about that. Okay, so the site is located south of Chinden and west of Locust Grove.
Alan, do you have a visual that you were?
Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't sharing. My bad. Guess it's helpful if you are looking at what I'm looking at. Okay. Site is located south of Chinden, west of Locust Grove. Brookdale State Subdivision is to the west, which is over here. The Higher Tower Subdivision is to the east, over here. Saguaro Canyon Subdivision is to the south, and there is an existing church, which you can see in this aerial here. That's still zoned RUT in the county. Just a quick history on this property. So this property was proposed for annexation and zoning to R8 and plat for 48 lots is what was known as the Bull Ranch subdivision, and that was in 2015. This was subsequently denied by the council, with density being a primary concern and that R4 zoning was more appropriate here than R8. Comprehensive plan recommends this for medium density residential at 3 to 8 dwelling units per acre. So this is an annexation again of 10 acres of land with the R8 zoning district and a preliminary plat to allow 40 building lots and 7 common lots. North Elk Ranch Lane, which is what you see here, this is a private road. And this presently provides access from the subject property to Shinden, which is what you see up here. The subdivision proposes to connect to 3 existing local streets. So it would be 1, 2, 3 different stubs. There's also another stub being provided eventually in case the church property redevelops. Our code states that when a property has existing access from a state highway, again here, that if the applicant proposes a change or an increase in intensity of use, that they have to develop or otherwise acquire access to a street other than the highway, and that this would be closed. So the use of this, staff is recommending as a condition of approval that the applicant vacate all their interests in North Elk Ranch Lane, as again, because the property already has 3 points of access, and that's what the code requires. The plot shows the North Slough, which is what you find my pointer, the North Slough bisecting the property at roughly a 45-degree angle, north to south. And this is being relocated and piped in accordance to the code. According to an exhibit provided by the applicant, the ditch is being reconfigured towards the northwest part of the property. Obviously, this would need to be coordinated with the irrigation district. Applicant has submitted elevations of the single-family homes for this project. These homes appear to meet the design requirements for single-family homes and are consistent with the architecture of the surrounding neighborhood. Staff did express several concerns with this proposal. One of them was that we thought it was too dense on the south and they needed to take a couple of lots out on the south to make it fit better and transition better with the adjacent properties. What you're seeing here is actually an older version. So the other comment that we had is that we thought they should line up the lot lines better on the lots to the east. Since our earliest discussion, the applicant has lost a lot. The applicant has actually lost 2 lots, and I'm going to talk about that here in a second. As of today, as far as written testimony goes, we've only gotten 1 letter of opposition, but there were citizens that showed up to the Planning Commission meeting. Now, the plat does meet all the requirements of the UDC, and it's consistent with the density designation. With that, staff did recommend approval. When the Planning Commission happened at the Planning Commission, this was on January of 2002, and the commission moved to deny the subject annexation and rezoning request. This was based on, first of all, they preferred that it would be annexed as R4 and not R8. They had concerns about it barely meeting the minimums. Under the current code, this property would need to require 15% open space, but it slipped in right before the code was actually the update to the code was approved. So if there's an application that's made prior to the newest version of the code, we have to review it under the old version of the code. So they don't meet the 15% that would be required today, but they exceed the 10% that was required at the time that the application was received. Planning Commission had concerns with whether or not that was, I think the word they used was premier. They also had concerns with whether or not there was good open space and whether or not, again, they thought that the density wasn't quite there. Since this time of the Planning Commission, what you see on the left was the landscape plan that was provided at the Planning Commission. It's pretty basic. What you see on the right is the landscape plan that I received about a week ago. For the difference, first of all, is since Planning Commission, they've lost a lot. You'll see that they have included a pathway sort of around the perimeter of the property that wasn't there before. They have increased the central open space. They've actually moved it. The open space, all of their usable open space on the original version on the left was here. Since that time, they have increased it more and put some amenities in there, which I'm sure they're going to talk about. This has decreased the open space that was originally shown on the first exhibit, which was about 14.6%. Their most recent exhibit shows 14%. But again, the open space is more usable that they have now. With that, again, staff recommended approval because they met the code. Planning Commission was not supportive of this and recommended denial. With that, I will stand for any questions or comments, Council.
Thank you, Alan. Council, questions for staff?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Strader.
Thank you. I do have a couple questions. Thank you. This practice of applying the current code at the time that an application is put in, is that just because of our current practice, how we handle things? Is that by code? Help me understand that.
I can see Mr. Neri's hackle starting to pop up. Just it's been land use law that's been established for many, many years in the United States, not just here, but I'll let Bill sort of speak to that.
Mr. Members of the council, no, he's correct. I mean, that is the state of the law both here and everywhere else, that the application takes the code that exists at the time they file the application. So that's the basis for it.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Scher.
Perfect. Thanks for that answer. And then my other question is, how would this look different if it was an R4, either in terms of the dimensional standards or the density? Could you walk me through maybe just a compare and contrast how this would be different if it was an R4?
Well, R8, council person and Mr. Mayor, the R8 requires 8,000 square foot lots, if I'm correct, going off the top of my head here. Somewhat bigger dimensional requirements. It sort of comes down to the same conversation that happened when we talked about Apex last month. If they went with R4, would they really get less lots? Well, these lots are smaller than 8,000 square feet. Most of these lots just barely meet the minimums. So yeah, it would probably be lower density under R4.
Thanks.
I'll double check. I'm going to double check on those dimensional standards because I'm not Bill and I don't have it memorized. So if I'm wrong, I'll let you know.
Council, any additional questions for staff? Okay, then would the applicant like to come forward? State your name and address for the record, be recognized for 15 minutes.
Yes. Mayor and members of the council, my name is Joe Canning, and I'm employed by Centurion Engineers, formerly B&A Engineers. And the address is 2323 South Vista, Suite 206 in Boise, Idaho 83705. And I am here tonight. I think I'm going to do the main presentation. I am here with the applicant, Mike Homan. Mike may want to come up and also say a few words after I'm done. So, and then also I did just 3 slides I submitted before. We don't need those right away. I just want to make for sure they're ready. I'm not sure how that gets loaded up and going. So when I'm ready, we can go ahead and put those up. And they're pretty simple slides. Of course, we are here tonight seeking approval of this modified preliminary plat. And modifications have been made per the comments that were made by the Planning Commission here a few weeks ago. And Alan already discussed those, but just to reiterate, the 3 main things we got was there was a suggestion that we should do an R8 zone instead of an R4 zone. It was the quality of the amenities for the open space was an issue, and the amount and location of the open space. And I got the impression it really wasn't necessarily the amount, because this plat was submitted to the city, I believe, back in September. It's been around quite a while, and that was before the new open space ordinance came in. So I think there was a little bit of confusion there on which ordinance applies. But I think we've really upped the game, so to speak, in the open space location and the quality of the amenities. So annexation and zoning. So why R8? The comp plan designation for this property is medium density residential, which is 3 to 8 units per acre. The project is 40 home sites. That's 4 units per acre. So we're pretty much at the low end of that designation for the comp plan. And when I come up with the slides, I'm going to talk a little bit about the existing house that really does impact some of that lot area requirements. So it's possible in existing development. This is really kind of sandwiched in here. It's kind of an island. It's surrounded by Meridian currently on 3 sides. There's a variety of zoning in the area. I'll talk about that in just a minute. But I also want to reiterate that there is a development agreement proposed for this project. So even if the zoning was approved at R8. There is a development agreement proposed that would limit it to the submittal for the preliminary plat that you're seeing tonight. So if I could, I'd like that first slide. There it is right there. I see it. So I just wanted to show this as some of the reason why we really think the R8 is appropriate, particularly with the development agreement. Number one to the north is the church, the Friendship Celebration Lutheran Church. Although that's in the county, it has a Meridian City Comp Plan designation of MUC. So that could be probable commercial or high density residential. So what we typically try to do is buffer those more intense areas that could happen with a project of a little less intensity. So whether R8's much less intensity or not, I'm not too sure, but we feel that zoning's appropriate. Off to the east is the Hightower subdivision. That's already zoned R8. To the south is R4 property, which is Carroll Canyon subdivision. And then of course to the west is Birkdale subdivision, which is R2. It's quite low density. But I think the part of the key here is how we're adjusting some of these lots to try to match that variety in zoning. So if we could get the second slide, please.
Should be able to.
Thank you. So this was the prior preliminary plat, the one that the Planning and Zoning Commission first looked at. And I just wanted to point out a few things on here. There's the existing home that's over on that west boundary. That home is very well landscaped, quite mature landscaping around it. It takes up quite a bit of property. So that's part of the density issue we have is that parcel's big, it's existing. It's a very nice house. We're not really going to do too much to change that. Alan already mentioned the three existing stub streets that come into this property from the east, south, and the west. That's a real plus for the transportation network, I think, in the area. The Settlers Irrigation Facility, North Slough, does bisect this property. That was one of the challenges to the design, was how to coordinate that piping and relocation. And originally, the open space was located more toward the west side. It's over by that existing house. Part of that reason was because of that relocation of the North Slough. It made that a little bit easier to do. However, there were objections to that. The Planning Commission really wanted that open space to be more centrally located. So that was one of the changes we've made. And the original open space, the lot count popped up and down on this a little bit as it went through the process. I think the original that was actually submitted was about 13% open space. So if we could go to the third slide. This is the landscape plan for the current proposal that's before you tonight. One of the big differences here is we think we listened pretty good in that canal relocation was still an issue. If we eliminated that open space over toward the west, we had to figure out a new route for that canal relocation. So the applicant did talk to Settlers, and as long as that open space along that east side and north side is at least 30 feet wide, we're able to relocate that. It's a big pipe. It's a 36-inch pipe in that open space. Plus, we can use it as I think, a pretty quality amenity for the project. So now we have, I think, a good proposal for that open space and the canal to be rerouted along that east and north side. And it really provides some open space in fairly close proximity to everyone that would be in the subdivision. This current layout has open space of approximately 14%. So it's approximately the same as before, but a little bit more. And once again, I just wanted to remind everybody that this did come in under the original or the old ordinance. As far as amenities, that was one of the concerns, quality amenities from the Planning and Zoning Commission. The larger area down there toward the south contains play equipment, a bocce court, benches, a shade structure. There's walking paths throughout the project now. And of course, there's always pet and waste stations that are proposed so you can walk your dog and have them taken care of. I think in general, we can just lay out some of the project assets. Number one, a big item is we will be piping the Settlers Irrigation Facility that runs through this project. This is an easy to serve property. with existing access and infrastructure. City water and sewer is there, the stub streets are there. It's pretty easy to serve. The stub street to the north, going up to, or the private road to the north going to Chinden would be eliminated. So I think that's an asset for the project. I want to talk a little bit about adjusting the lot sizes. Off to the east is the R8 property. So we've kind of feathered these lot sizes. As you start on the east side, you'll find they're more or less matching what's over on the R8 property to the east. And then as you go south and west, the lots get larger. And in particular on the R2 side, on the extreme west property, we have approximately the same number, I think it is the same number of lots that abut that property over there. And a big part of that's existing home. So we've kind of feathered these lot sizes to match those perimeter zones. To the south, it's almost an R4 layout. You'll see the lot count there is quite similar to what's further to the south of it. Once again, I just want to mention that even though we're seeking an R8 zone, a development agreement will cap this at 4 units per acre. So we're really at kind of the low end and almost at the R4 density anyway. And as I mentioned, this is really surrounded by existing neighborhoods in Meridian. We think it's time to be annexed and brought in. It will provide much needed housing. No one can say enough about the housing that's necessary for the area. We believe we've provided a much improved project over what was before the Planning and Zoning Commission. And we certainly hope that council agrees. And we would hope they support the annexation, zoning, and preliminary plat. Thank you. And then Mike, did you want to add anything? I'll stand for questions.
Thank you.
Y'all
Council,
have
any
some
questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burnt.
one question for the applicant. Back in 2015, sir, this body denied a project at the same density of I should say density, same zoning of R8. Is there a reason why you brought R8 back, a project that was R8 instead of at a lower density than what was recommended by a previous council?
Well, there's not a specific reason why other than when we looked at the lot sizes in the R4 zone, it would have really reduced the density. There was a question earlier on what it would have an impact. It would reduce the number of lots in this by about 30 or 40%. And we're not sure the R8 really fits with the area. I mean, it's already R8 to the east. It's R4 to the south, R2. We tried to accommodate that difference by number one, there are less lots than in 2015. We tried to feather these lots to match those other perimeter areas. Not sure that's a great answer, but that's why we did it.
Councilman Cavanagh.
I see you. Appreciate you bringing this kind of unique infill project. I remember the previous iterations before us back in 2015, and while a lot's changed, a lot has also stayed the same. And what's kind of caught my eye about your layout, I really appreciate the pathway and the open space. And I see this really cool play structure, which tells me again, you're being thoughtful. You know, young families will likely be a lot of the residents in this neighborhood. Over the past few weeks and months, council have really deliberated on projects, particularly those that bring students into a school that is over capacity. And in looking at the letter from West Ada, it looks like, I think this would fit into a Rocky Mountain and Sawtooth Middle School, and both of those are over capacity. So help me kind of understand as a council member who have a lot of our residents who have really been pretty vocal about their concerns about the impacts on the schools, how this project is a win for our community when it would put students at an already overcapacity school.
Well, I can't speak too much for the overcapacity school, but I will tell you why I think it might be a win for the community. I personally love infill projects. I think they're the way to go.
Absolutely.
And I would much rather see a project like this here than somewhere else farther out. I think that's the main thing. There's not much we can do about the schools. Perhaps we could go senior citizens. I don't know, but that wouldn't be what happens. No.
Sure.
So Joe, maybe I missed this. What's with the little micro path at the end of the cul-de-sac to the property line?
Should have mentioned that. There is an existing micro path that goes off to the subdivision to the west that comes up to this property line, so we would continue that. yeah.
Okay, so it has functionality.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Council, any additional questions for the applicant? All right, thank you.
You.
Mr. Clerk, I assume some of these fine people are here to talk about this item this evening?
Mr. Mayor, several fine people have signed in. The first is David Marcy.
When your name's called, if you'd like to come forward and say your name and address to the record and be recognized for 3 minutes.
David Marcy. I live at 768 East Pasacana Street, which backs up to the property. So good evening, Mr. Mayor and council. First of all, when we bought our house that backs up to the property 5 years ago, we were absolutely told there was going to be development there. And we were said, good. What kind of development? Are we going to see a Walmart? What are we going to see back there? And they said, no, we expect to see no Walmart. We expect to see homes that are very similar to your homes. And it would be classified as R4. And I said, oh, fantastic. So if it matches what is in our subdivision, we were absolutely good with that. So we were told they were going to be like homes, but now it appears the developer wants to make it R8 so that we can jam more homes into that 10-acre parcel. I'm a businessman as well. I understand the financial part and the reasons why someone would want to get more properties in there. I just ran some basic math looking at what our subdivision homes sell for. And the numbers they're raw numbers, but they're real. R8, it's worth about $26 million. And as R4, it's worth about $16 million. So taking what the homes that are selling for in our subdivision, you know, I see the developer clearing about 16 million minus all the expenses. So that was one thing where I said, okay, I get it. That's why I would want R4 as a developer as well, because I stand to make more money. I'm very pro-growth. Matter of fact, I love the fact we've been in Meridian since 1993, and we have seen a lot of very good, smart growth happen in the area, which makes me extremely happy. Not only as a homeowner, but as a business owner as well. So I like to see it. Planning and zoning agreed that R4 was the way to go. I believe that they denied it. Well, they did deny it last month, and I was in full support of it. So I would hope, Mr. Mayor, that you would consider pushing it to an R4 to match what is predominantly around in the other subdivisions. I do like what they've done. I think if they would have presented this to planning and zoning, they probably would have got a check mark. It looks great, but they didn't. So it was denied by planning and zoning. So I hope you would support holding to an R4. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Council, any questions?
Mr. Mayor? I appreciate your testimony. I didn't catch your name. I'm sorry.
David Marcy.
Mr. Marcy, thank you for your testimony. And I guess something that would be helpful for me, recognize that what's proposed with this is development agreement that would essentially lock these units, this amount of units in on this particular project. From your perspective, what would you see differently in an R4 that you're not seeing before you today? Help me understand. I understand an R4 versus an R8, and it's, we don't get a lot of people that come and say, bring on more density. So
Absolutely.
I can appreciate that argument, but help me as it pertains to this project, what you'd like to see differently.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think looking at going R4 versus R8, one, I don't know if anybody travels Shinden or anybody travels any of the subdivisions near Shinden. The traffic is exponentially growing already. I regularly have to get on Shinden to take towards I-84 towards Caldwell. If I try at 8 o'clock, I'm guaranteed it's 10 minutes, 15 minutes to try to make a left turn. So I'm just looking at it from the sheer fact that we're going to just be placing more traffic and more burden into a pretty tight area already. I love the fact that you talked about the schools. I have grandkids. We have 4 grandkids that live on Pasacana as well. Same thing, that the schools are overcrowded. So I really liked even thinking about that. It hadn't something that hadn't crossed my mind. But that would be my take, is the fact that we're just jamming more traffic into a tight box already.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, next is Daryl Gallup.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. My name is Daryl Gallup. I reside at 554 East Pasacana Street in Meridian, 83646. As you've already heard, about 6 years ago, this essentially the same subdivision was proposed to council and turned down. And Mayor DeWeert and Councilman Byrd were especially against the project due to the high density of housing requested. I oppose the zoning of R8 for this project. R4 zoning is more appropriate for this subdivision so as to be compatible with the R2 zoning to the west of the project and R4 zoning to the south of the project. R8 zoning of this subdivision is too dense. It would create significant traffic on roads going in and out of the subdivision and would also potentially place a burden on neighborhood schools, which are already overcrowded. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, next is Greg Barron.
Mayor, Council. My name is Greg Barron and I live at 5997 North Sunita Hills Avenue. When I purchased my home directly adjacent to the empty land in proposal, I was aware that one day it would likely be built upon. I am not against growth. However, I do have significant concerns regarding the current zoning request of the R8 for this project. And my concerns are these. First and foremost is the significant influx of traffic that these 40 new homes would bring to the surrounding neighborhoods. That is likely to be at least 80 additional drivers making trips in and out of the Friendship subdivision. Being that 2 of the 3 access points, Lockhart Way and Sunita Hills Avenue, would require a driver to make a lengthy trek through the adjacent subdivision to gain access to a main roadway, it is fair to assume that the Talon Street would be the primary point of entry-exit for the Friendship subdivision. This is the street most accessible from Chinden, which is the closest artery feeding into the area. Talon Street would become far too busy as a thoroughfare for these 40 new homes, significantly disrupting the quiet community made up primarily of retired people. Number 2, the surrounding subdivisions, both to the south and to the west, are zoned as R4 and R2, respectively. To insert a subdivision zoned as R8 amongst these much larger lots would have an undesirable effect on the property values and aligning with the aesthetics of the surrounding communities. This higher density housing would mean that I would personally gain 2 new neighbors along my north property line. My neighbor to the west would gain 3 new neighbors along his north property line. This could all be rectified if zoning were mandated as R4 to align with existing lot sizes in the current subdivisions. I respectfully urge you to deny the zoning request for R8 and instead require either R2 or R4 as the standard for this project. It should be noted that the zoning for R8 was denied back in 2015 and again recommended for denial by planning and zoning just last month. And the schooling issue was on my mind too. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Mayor. Councilman Hoagland.
Mr. Barron, Mr. Barron, question. I just want to make sure I was following you there on Talon. That's a street that stubbed currently to the west that comes in from the east, from the R8 that is that way. And then I'm assuming to go to Chinden, I didn't catch the street you were mentioning because I see looking on Google Earth, North Saguaro Hills Avenue can lead out to Chinden. Is that the street you were referencing? Or where were people going?
Talon Street.
We don't have it here. I see where Talon Street is. Yeah, and it heads east. And then they can take a left on North Saguaro Hills Avenue to head to Chinden.
And then left.
And then left.
North.
Okay, but there's not a light yet there at that intersection, although that is the looks like it's the halfway point.
Yeah.
ACHD typically in ITD go at that half mile for when they eventually do a light. So that would be the,
It's like halfway in between Locust Grove and Meridian.
right. So the normal spot.
I think there's a coffee shop right there, right? Is that where Bright Eyes is?
That is where Bright Eyes is. Yes, Mr. Mayor. So, okay, I just wanted to make sure I was following your directions there on that because I didn't understand the street name there. So, okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, the only other person saying they wanted to speak was the applicant.
Is there anybody else that would like to provide testimony on this item? If so, please come forward at this time. Or anybody online, if you'd like to provide testimony, please use the raise your hand feature. Seeing none, ask the applicant to come forward for final comments.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, Joe Canning. And Mike is still here if he needs to add anything at the end. I'm going to make one more pitch, I think, for that R8. And I think it has to do with the future planning. Please keep in mind that the property to the north is set up in the comp plan as MUC. I personally don't really think it's appropriate to have an R4 zone that close to an MUC. The R8 is actually a fairly low density transition from those commercial or potentially high density residential projects. We already have R8 to the east. And like I say, we've tried to feather this so it really does feel like larger lots, particularly at the south and the west. Just please keep in mind that future area to the north. The church has quite a large area behind it. We're seeing churches redevelop some of those properties. They typically have to wait until water and sewer gets there. We will be providing water and sewer to that church property along with this stub street. So that's the main thing I want to comment on the R4 versus the R8. Regarding traffic, there are 3 access points. Even if everyone uses the same access point, there will be less than 400 vehicle trips per day from this project. The ACHD had no issue with the project. So, and once again, this is not a uncommon issue with infill projects. These folks have to go somewhere. We're going to be closing that access out to Chinden. I really think that is about all I have to respond. I'd be more than happy to answer any other questions the council has.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
And you touched on this a couple of times, and so it's at least piqued my interest. Is the church trying to be sold? Or are they trying to sell their lot and move someplace else? Is that what's warranted? Kind of, you keep referencing the designation for that land, but it's still a church that's in operation as far as I know.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, council member, yes, it is still a church. We're just staring that as planners. Our office planners have been looking at it and saying, there's a good chance something will happen there. And the big issue is water and sewer provided to that parcel. We did a recent project with Zamzows just to the west on Chinden, and they were sure wishing they had water and sewer.
Sure. Okay.
So that, we just expect that it happens.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader.
thank you. Curious, I'm just looking, it looks like you made a lot of positive changes in response to comments, and it looks like on the westernmost side, you lined up the lot lines, from what I can tell. Looks like on the east side you did. I guess I'm curious in the southwest part, lots 1 through 5, why you didn't try to match up? Did you consider matching those lot lines with the neighbors?
We did, Mayor, Council Member, we did look at that. Part of the issue there is there's a couple of those lots that are around a corner in Sciorro Canyon. So they're huge lots because they're kind of like a segment off of a curve. So it was nearly impossible to really match that without just making an enormous lot.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Schrader.
Yeah, it's just like a follow-up. I think in the past on this exact property, city council's been, sounds like pretty emphatic in wanting to see R4. I guess I'm surprised that you wouldn't, and these infill projects are really hard, so I empathize a lot, but I guess I'm surprised that you wouldn't lose like 2 lots in that southwest corner to try to say, hey, look, we've lined up exactly with R4 on 3 sides. Maybe you put some more density in the middle, but I think that would have buffered the neighbors a lot more. I guess I'd be curious if that's something that you would consider down the line, or if you feel like this is what makes the most sense for the project.
Well, it probably makes the most sense. That question specifically probably have to be addressed to the applicant. Mike, sounds like he wants to.
Mike Coleman, 6820 West Randolph Drive, Boise, Idaho. This is been a difficult project, been an infill. We had that huge ditch to deal with going across it. And we finally talked to Settlers Irrigation about moving it up and around and piping it. And then we're doing it 30 feet wide where it can work as a pedestrian path. And they'll be able to get around that. And then we really stepped our game up, centralizing the common area with the bocce court and several other amenities. Joe, where's they talking about where we're not matching up good? I'm sorry to get you.
This area
Right here. Yeah, we've already dumped a lot to the west there. And over to the east, we're matching, that's R8, we're matching their lot lines. And then again, Joe mentions the north that could be redeveloped into apartments or other things. So we're good there. I'd be willing to drop a lot on the west if that helps getting approved of that. And then again, our development agreement, we're locked into the lot count, which would be at 4 lots to acre. So right now we've got 30, huh? We got 40 counting the existing house. Yeah. So on the west there, to be more compatible, I'd be willing to drop a lot, and that would be to the west of the property.
This might be an opportunity also to complain a little bit, perhaps. When we do infill projects, we typically get these stub streets that come into our projects. That south stub street certainly isn't where I would have preferred it. If it would have been in a different location, and we would have been much better off. And just to say one more word about the R4 zoning, to get that 8,000 square feet, we're probably not going to be able to meet offset separations to intersections that ACG requires because of that south stub street. It's going to pretty much ruin that alignment of those lots over on the east side. We have to provide so many feet from that north-south road to that stub street, and it's really marginal right now. So going to R4, just 8,000 square feet, it's going to be a heck of a density. That's for sure.
Mayor.
Councilwoman Schrader.
So just to delve into this a little bit more. So under the R4 zone, I think we have a different new open space requirement as well. But I guess I'd be curious if you could compare, if this was under the R4 zoning, previously you mentioned you'd have to reduce the number of lots by 30 to 40%. I guess that seems really high to me. I'm surprised it actually makes that big of a difference. What would be the dimensional standards of R4 lots? If, you know, just to compare whether it's 8,000 square feet or.
Yeah, so the R4, my understanding is a minimum lot width of 60 feet wide and a square footage of 8,000. And so those ones where we dropped a lot already, the ones to the south, our lots there are 101 deep by 76, somewhere right in there. And 77. So if I take another lot out there to be more compatible, some of those lots that back up to us are flag lots where they're super wide in the back and narrow in the front. But I would be, we worked real hard on this project to try to get everything to work. And so I think where we got R8 to the east there, we're compatible. To the north, we're compatible. And then just this west property line, if we drop a lot out of there, those on that bank of lots, we would be over the square footage requirements there and be compatible. But again, we'll have it locked in a development agreement that's holding us to 39 buildable lots.
And if I may, maybe I could address that a little better. And a lot of that has to do with that offset difference between the intersections. In your R8 zoning, 8,000 square feet, we can't really move the east boundary of that north-south road on the east road further to the west because we'll be getting too close to that stub street. So that means those lots along that west side, or excuse me, the east side as an example, would have to be 80 feet wide to get to that 8,000 square feet. So it makes a heck of a difference on that east side. And similarly, on that interior row of lots, it'd be a similar thing there. We'd have to keep shoving that west road further and further to the west. And that may be doable there.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Schrader.
One more thing I'd like feedback on. I personally have really been struggling with annexations because of the overcrowding in the school system. This area is very acute. I personally have been an advocate for continuing projects for a couple months while we continue to have these conversations with the West Ada School District to at least get a understanding of their plan to cope with future growth. You know, is that something that you're open to if this process takes longer for you to perhaps work on and come back with something a little different? Just wondering what your feedback is in terms of your timing and.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm about out of time on my purchase agreement with the seller. And if there's a way that I could drop another lot on the west there to be more compatible. And then the rest of the subdivision, I think, you know, we got R8 to the east. We're good there to the north with the church. And then we were real sensitive on that west property line to put very few lots in there. We only got 2 lots back up. And, 2 new lots. Yeah, sorry. But I'm going to drop another lot if it makes it easier for you guys to make it.
So, Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Schrader.
I apologize. I'm not trying to hog the mic. I guess it's hard without a different plan being in front of us to react to it. You know, there's one gentleman who was up here who was saying, you know, he'll have 3 neighbors now. I mean, can you tell us like more specifically if you drop one lot, like kind of how that would line up? I honestly was suggesting that you drop 2 lots, which I'm sure you wouldn't love that idea, but that would exactly match up then, right?
Okay, sorry. Just out of time. So, I mean, I'd be willing to drop 2 lots to the west and line them up to be able to try to keep.
Thank you for the feedback.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Hoagland, I don't know if this is a question for Joe or Mike, but in your redesign, are those lots on the east going to line up? You've got them 1 for 1. And if you go wider, now does that devalue the property that you're developing because supposedly they don't line up now and there's going to be 2 houses? I have 2 houses behind my lot. I've got a big lot. It is what it is. I mean, are the houses that are on Talaman that face Saguaro, since there's, people are matching 2 lots, how, I don't know, you know, with your pathway between there, you've got the easement. If you put in the canal, the ditch through that and pipe it, then you've got some buffer. So I think that would help. But is there going to be any concern now if you change that and move those lots around? Does that devalue the lots because you're up against R8? I mean, Joe, I have to say, I was surprised you say you like infill. I think we're really hard on infill because you got different people wanting different things and you can't really make it work for everybody. So you have my sympathy, but
to the east there, when we had our neighborhood meeting, before we did the stub road to the church, we had one big lot back there. The neighbor behind there says, I don't want a monster house behind me, you know, can you readjust it? And I was like, oh, okay. So we did when we put that stub road there. So their lot sizes were matching them, the width that they are. And then down here on the only thing is to the south, you know, if we take 2 more lots out, we'll be over the dimensional standards for the R4. And again, we're tied to that development agreement that we can't, you know, add lots. So just because we have the R8 zoning, we're not putting 8 lots in, you know, right now we're at 4. And with this property, to make everybody happy, I think that if we drop a couple lots, our lots are bigger than the R4 standards.
And Mr. Mayor,
If I may, I think Mike's talking about 2 lots on that south row. And you're referring to the R8 lots?
East side, yes.
Yeah, and that was one advantage of putting that open space over there, is it the units to the east in that subdivision are substantial structures. They're big, and there's not much of a setback to the side lot lines. So when we first thought, we tried to offset those property lines so that at least folks could look down at some kind of a corridor.
Yeah.
But now with the open space there, it's even, we think, much more attractive to pull them further away from those buildings over there, and they are substantial structures.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
a question for Alan, and kind of for the benefit of people out there. If we reach an agreement on certain things and it goes into a developer's agreement, which when we refer to DA, that's what we're talking about. That locks that property to that proposal. So if by chance Mike decides I'm going to sell, that DA goes with that property. Is that correct?
Councilperson Hoagland, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Alan Tiefenbach, that's correct. The DA is the staff report, the concept plans, the elevations, the landscape plan, all that is tied to the DA. That's the project that has to get built. As long as they substantially comply to that, like maybe they lose a lot, but it's the same general configuration, they could still build. They couldn't add another lot though.
So, Mr. Mayor and Alan, to follow that then, so if someone comes in, it's R8, they can't now go, hey, we're going to do 8 units, to the acre. They have to follow that DA.
They can do less, but not more.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Council, any additional questions, comments?
If I could for just a moment, the only reason I like infill projects is I think from a planning perspective, they make sense. They are hard to do.
They are.
And I think if I could, I'm going to speak up for the applicant just a little bit on this, is that if we're asking people to do infill, there is give and take. And I think we've seen that our zoning standards have not made sense in some of the applications we've seen, whether they're infill or whether they're on odd shaped parcels. Sometimes zone matters. Sometimes design is more important than zoning. I'm not going to say which one is appropriate here, because right or wrong, some of your challenges are because you have an existing home that has chosen to stay there. That home wasn't there. How would this design be different even from that standpoint? We can't say from that standpoint, neither you, but you're dealt the circumstance you're with and you try to make it work. And sometimes zoning matters, sometimes design is more important. I'll let you guys sit down now but I would say in the front row.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
Kind of kick off discussion a little bit. That's the interesting thing about infill projects is they are a challenge because you do have different interests and different things. And this is interesting just because it's actually following the comp plan. And how many times do we get developers coming in wanting to change the comp plan and everyone around it are saying, follow the comp plan. You're not following your own plan. So, we're following our plan here, but we're thinking we might need to change it when, that's what we try not to do. And we also know that topography, man-made features, in this case, a canal, make infill projects a challenge. How it's designed, as you noted, Mr. Mayor, the existing house, they've already decreased from the 48 to 40, which is a 16-17% decrease in the number of homes. There is that challenge to the north of what will that be someday? Is that going to be commercial? Is it going to be something else? The willingness of the applicant to fix that, what would that be? The southwest corner with lots, making that match makes it more attractive. The other hard part is infill is the most inexpensive impact to the city when it comes to sewer, water, police, fire. It's all in place. Roads, they're there. They're ready to go. That's why I'm always, when we don't do an infill project, that's a good project. It just kind of weights on me a little bit just from the fact that, man, everything is there. The cost it's as low as we can get it and to make it work. And yes, there is an impact to the schools. We've got them coming, I think, staff for the first one on the 22nd, and then other officials later on. But for our lane, for city services, it makes sense to do infill projects like this. It works, but depends on what the whole council wants to do.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Borton.
I'll dovetail on Councilman Hoagland's comments. This is quite different. It's progressed from 2015 to today, even from P&Z to today. And even through today's hearing, I think the applicants made a couple of concessions which do assist in that transition and capture some of the characteristics of some R4 lot size design, at least to that southwest. So I thought with the concession of removing those two lots, I understand the road setback issue. I think it's a good project. Quite frankly, it meets the mark in my eyes. The setback, or excuse me, the open space around the perimeter also provides some buffer and setback to the east and also to the north. So all in all, these infills, Councilman Hoagland's correct, are difficult. I'm glad that we take our time and grind through them because they are hard, but they're very important to get done right. And I think the applicant, with the changes that were provided today, in my eyes, it meets the mark. I know we don't have findings of approval, so I think if something were to proceed, my sense is it still has to come back for conditions, but I think it's met the mark.
Yes, Alan.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Alan Tiefenbach. Staff did draft conditions of approval. Those are in the staff report and those are crossed out. So if you were inclined to approve this tonight, you could just overturn what the planning commission struck and resustain the conditions of approval. They've already been written.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burnt.
does the applicant agree to, if this were to be approved, the conditions of approval that were struck out?
Mayor, council member, yes. The one exception is I think Alan, talked about the offsets on the east side. On the lot
That's
lines.
correct. That's the only one they didn't agree with, was lining up the side lot lines with the subdivision to the east. So staff mentioned in planning commission that we weren't going to die on the sword for that one.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Neri.
Mr. Mayor's Council, if you were to go that direction, we would need a new plat map though, because with the two less lots, they've agreed to remove on the southwest.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Schrader.
I originally was, after reading the application, was pretty dead set against this. But I do feel you've made a lot of changes. I appreciate the concession, the key concession of losing 2 lots to the southwest. I think that's going to make a big difference for the neighbors. Look, infill development is really tough. I think we all know that the city's growing. I think when you're looking at a medium density residential in your future land use map, probably the best transition you could ask for as a neighbor, if I were in your shoes, that I would be hoping for, is to have the lot lines match up or very close. I think that the applicant hopefully will be able to accomplish that with this change. And it's a very small, relatively small project compared to some of the ones we look at 10 acres. And given that it's infill, I think I could probably stomach it, although I'm still upset about the school issues, but I think we're definitely making a lot of progress on setting up some meetings on that. And certainly 20 kids is not going to make or break it anytime soon. I think we have time to work through that. So that's where I'm at. I think I'm supportive of it now with that change.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Public hearing still open. I tend to agree. One, I appreciate honestly the communication from our planning and zoning commission and the applicant being responsive. Sometimes when P and Z says go one way and the applicant shows up, not taking that into consideration, that really, I think, can at least irritates me as a council member. So I appreciate taking the feedback from the planning and zoning commission to heart and the feedback from the public tonight. I was pretty opposed to this project, mostly for the student piece. I think honestly, with the loss of 2 lots, we get much closer to, I think, what the residents would envision around an R4. I do think these homes would mirror similar to what's around the neighborhood. And obviously it being tied to the developer agreement gives me enough comfort. And I agree with the sentiments. Infill is so hard. And I think that we tend to be a little more critical of infill than other projects. But I think this does meet the mark, and I could be supportive of it in light of the reduction of lot.
Well, as was mentioned, I don't want to presume, but do we need to continue this to give time to redo the plat?
Mayor, Councilmember, as far as adjusting that plat, that'll be just a few days. We're not moving any streets, so it's pretty easy.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
Yeah, your part is easy. Getting on our schedule is the hard part. Chris, I don't have the agendas in front of me for future meetings, and Alan's got some different things. So.
Mr. Hoagland, members of the council, Mr. Mayor, my only comment would be that we have code now that says that if they're making revisions to plans, they should be 15 days in advance at least.
That would, Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
what does our schedule look like? Mr. Clerk, for mid-March?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Hoagland, looking at the hearing calendar, mid-March, the 3:15 hearing appears to be pretty light. 3:22 as well. 3:08, you have three public hearings that are quite large already scheduled.
Or, Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
Mr. Holman, March 15th, knowing that where we're headed, does that work for you and your situation that you find yourself in from a timing standpoint?
And you'll have to come up to the mic, Mr. Holman. Thank you.
Looking at it.
Yep.
Okay. I'm looking at it with losing 2 lots there on the south side. Those lots go from 76 to about 85 on width. If there's a way that that we could, I'm really tight on my time frame on my offer, but if not, that will work, with that date.
I guess, Mr. Mayor and Mike, I mean, the council is talking about, the changes that you've made looks acceptable, and, with everything coming in the way we think it's going to come in, would be favorable for moving forward. So with that on the public record,
Yeah, that'll work.
does that help you in your
Yeah,
situation?
Yeah, it would. Thank you.
Okay, then with that, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
I move that we continue the public hearing for Friendship Subdivision H 2021-0083 through March 15th.
Second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to continue the public hearing till March 15th. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the public hearing is continued.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Neary.
Add one more fact. So since Alan said the previous findings were for approval, and if he can adjust those for the 15th, I don't like to have the development agreement done before the findings are approved, but if we feel that we're going to be comfortable with that, we can have the development agreement also ready so that if that can be approved with Mr. Holman's signature, then it'll be only one additional week to add the ordinance.
Alan, would you like to rebut that?
I don't want to rebut it. Just to clarify, how many lots did we land at?
Minus 2.
So we're at 38 lots? That's the agreement?
Yes.
Okay.
Fine with Mr. Neary. I mean, he's the attorney. They'd be the one drafting the agreement. I would just be doing pretty simple work with the conditions of approval.
See you back on the 15th with whatever you can get accomplished. So with that, council will move on to item 4, which is ordinance number 22, 1969. Ask the clerk to read this ordinance by title.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's an ordinance related to H 2021-0066 Red Aspen for annexation of a parcel of land lying in the northwest quarter of Section 24, Township 3 North, Range 1 West, Ada County, Idaho, and being more particularly described in Attachment A. And annexing certain lands and territories situated in Ada County, Idaho, and adjacent and contiguous to the corporate limits of the city of Meridian as requested by the city of Meridian. Establishing and determining the land use zoning classification of 2.99 acres of land from RUT to CG, General Retail and Service Commercial Zoning District in the Meridian City Code. providing that copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Recorder, and the Idaho State Tax Commission as required by law, and providing for a summary of the ordinance and providing for a waiver of the reading rules and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Council, you've heard this ordinance read by title. Is there anybody that like it's read in its entirety? If not, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
I move approval of ordinance number 22-1969 with suspension of rules.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 22-1969 under suspension of the rules. Is there any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Strater.
Aye.
Burnt. Cavanagh. Borton.
Aye.
Hoagland.
All ayes, motion carries, and the ordinance is agreed to. Council, anything under future meeting topics? Or do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
I have a motion to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned.